Florida Sports Network, Pat Kerwin from NFL Radio and the NFL Today Show to join us coming up at the top of the hour. It's a pleasure to welcome Mike Masala from the Dolphins Wire. The Dolphins Wire, part of the USA Today family. You can follow Mike on Twitter at Mike_Masala, Masala. Mike, it's David and Mark. Thanks for your time. A belated Happy New Year. How are you?
I'm doing well, guys. How are you guys doing?
Well, we are doing well. First off, I want to ask you the question I asked my co-host last segment. On the shocked scale of 1 to 10, where were you when the news broke yesterday on the shocked scale?
I feel like I was pretty close to a 9 on that one. This seemed like earlier in the season this was the way it was going to go, but after rattling off so many wins in a row, winning 8 of your last 9, sweeping the Patriots for the first time since 2000, it really came out of nowhere to me. This is something I wasn't really prepared for. If you look at all of the Black Monday coaching fires, this was not one that I was expecting to see.
You know, Mike, we thought it was a possibility, particularly if they lost to New England. I thought it was a possibility once Jim Harbaugh told a recruit that I'm going to entertain NFL offers. But when he gets fired, and a couple of people who cover the team pretty closely say that Harbaugh is not a candidate, that is probably what I was most surprised about. How surprised are you that Harbaugh is not a candidate, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little surprised there, especially because obviously we all know Stephen Ross's connections to the University of Michigan. That seems like it would be an obvious fit. There are some good NFL options. I'm just in, like I said, I'm in shock over the fact that you had a guy who brought you to 2 winning seasons for the first time in quite some time, and that you were able to move on from him. Seemed like with not much backlash from your own organization as far as the front office. With Jim Harbaugh specifically, I am a little bit surprised there. It does seem like he's giving a little bit of the I'm going to back my college football team over my team from Stephen Ross, which is interesting. But yeah, I was interested to see how quickly they made that announcement that Jeff Darlington came out with that report. I believe pretty much minutes after that he wasn't going to entertain, and this decision was made strictly off of Flores himself.
Yeah, then he was quoted, Stephen Ross was, as saying, I will not be the guy to rip Jim Harbaugh away from the University of Michigan, but we, of course, are of the belief if someone is going to be that guy, why not it be you? Mike Masala, the Dolphins Wire. The Dolphins Wire. Follow him on Twitter at Mike_Masala, Masala. Mike, it appears as if Stephen Ross basically said Brian Flores was difficult to work with, didn't play well with others, and I really don't think he's the guy to be with Tua going forward. Is that your gist?
Yeah, that's pretty much what we're getting out of this so far. There's been a lot of reports about the inner workings of the communications between Chris Grier and Flores and Tagovailoa, Flores and Ross. It's been kind of that whole situation has been a little bit of a mess. Obviously, you've seen how poor the offensive coordinator situation has gone there with 4 offensive coordinators essentially in 3 years. So it does seem like he has that little bit of Belichick. He's a tough guy to work with, tough guy to work for. But there also has been some players in that organization we've seen in the last 24 hours or so who have come to his defense and said that they really enjoyed playing for him and they really enjoyed their honesty. Tua said that throughout the season that throughout the Deshaun Watson rumors that he was really appreciative of how candid he was, and that may be media speak, but it is interesting to note that he was held in high regard from a lot of the people around there. But yeah, that does seem to be the main point is he wasn't the easiest to work with between owner, front office, and himself.
Mike, really simply, did they fire the right guy? I mean, Grier gets to stay. He drafted Tua, not Herbert. He's drafted a mess of an offensive line that's not worked out. Did they fire the right guy?
That's the thing that's been the most confusing part to me in this whole situation is that if you're going to fire Flores, and I am about as big of a Flores guy in this market that you'll find, you have to fire both. Because what Chris Grier has done in his situation has not been all that great. Yes, you've seen great draft picks, Jalen Waddle, Javon Holland in the last year, but you traded Minka Fitzpatrick. You moved on from your franchise left tackle. You moved him to Houston. You drafted Eichenberg to be his replacement. You drafted Austin Jackson to be his replacement. And then you essentially have drafted a quarterback who not everybody believes in this region, including a lot of people on their own team, including the coach who was back and forth with him last year in his rookie season. So I am not in the belief that Chris Grier should still be with this team. I think if you were going to make the decision to move on from Flores, even though I'm against it, you had to move on from both. But the fact that he's still there is just alarming to me.
Mike, did you just say that there are a lot of Tua's teammates that don't believe he's the guy?
No, sorry. What I was mentioning was like a lot of the way that they handled Tua playing his rookie year didn't seem like he was ready for his introduction into the NFL. Sorry about that.
Mike Masala from the Dolphins Wire. The Dolphins Wire. Follow him on Twitter at Mike_Masala, Masala. All right. Do you think that Ross/Grier have someone in mind, that they made this move, but within 48, 72 hours, they know who it is they're going to replace him with? Or are they literally starting from scratch? Because that would bother the heck out of me if I was a Dolphin fan. It's like, listen, I don't like you moving on from Flores, but please tell me that there's a plan and you know exactly who it is you want to replace him with.
I think there's probably a short list of guys. We already saw them request permission to interview Brian Dable from the Bills, and I'm sure there's a couple others that will come in the next day or two. But I'm not exactly sure they have a guy that they know they can nail down right now. I'm sure there's a guy, maybe Dable is that guy that they think this is the guy that we can get and this is the guy we want. But there's absolutely no guarantee that one of these guys comes to you, and you could end up being in a situation where you have a much worse coach than Brian Flores. If you've looked at the history of Dolphins coaches, he has the fourth highest winning percentage out of any coach there. Like, you don't get, I know it's a short sample size, but you haven't been much better. Beggars can't be choosers in these situations. And I don't think that they have a guaranteed next coach in waiting that they can go in and scoop up right away.
How close, in your estimation, are they? How close are they not to be in a playoff team, but to be a contender? We know who they're dealing with. They're dealing with Buffalo, Tennessee, Kansas City. How close is this team in your estimation?
From being a legitimate conference contender or a potential Super Bowl contender, I do think they are a few pieces away. I don't think Tua has shown that ability to be the quarterback to lead them to a Super Bowl yet. Maybe a guy you can win with, but definitely not a guy you can win because just yet. And it is early in his career. But you definitely need to address either that situation or you need to add more and more pieces around him. The offensive line was the biggest issue throughout this whole year. We saw how poor Jesse Davis played for most of the year up until this last game when he was replaced by Robert Jones. Having the offensive line issues that they had forced him to play in such a regulated way where the ball was out. He had, I believe, the second or third quickest release time in any quarterback in the NFL. And it wasn't because that's what he wanted to do. It's because that's what he had to do. And if you can fix the offensive line problems and get more from either Tua or another quarterback, this defense is good enough. The weapons are maybe not great, but they are good enough to be a contender in the AFC. Those are the things they have to do in order to get there.
Mike, as best you could tell, did Ross have to do this? I mean, was this an ultimatum when Grier said, I ain't working with him? And Flores were like, I ain't working with him. I mean, we're having a hard time believing. And believe me, the radio show that you're on, the two hosts can be difficult. Okay, we can. We've been fired before. Sometimes we've deserved it. Okay, most times we haven't, but we can be difficult. But we really have understood in the past when the bosses called us in and said, hey, get your you-know-what together or we're going to throw you out on the street. And we just have a hard time believing that this couldn't have been dealt with. Was it really that bad, or did Ross kind of overreact?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of an overreaction. because we don't hear from Chris Greer that much, we haven't really gotten his side of the whole story between Flores and Greer. I think if anything, like I said earlier, I think Greer should have been the one to go. He has been the one who has played more into the reasons why this team hasn't been as successful. And you can say what you want about Flores' inability to put a coaching staff together. Again, we talked about the offensive coordinators, the offensive line coaches. They've all had their issues there. But I do think this is something that you didn't have to make the decision to move on from Flores. But until we know what Chris Greer actually thinks, and we may never know that, I'm not sure we can really say one way or the other.
Very quickly, at first glance, how are the Dolphins positioned this offseason? Like from a cap situation, because there's already a couple of guys, like Gesicki might be on the market. Well, the Jets have $60 million and have a glaring need for a tight end. I mean, who is it right now that Dolphin fans should be worried about from a cap standpoint that they're not going to be able to retain?
Yeah, that 75 million, 80 million, the numbers kind of fluctuated and will when the incentives finally come in on what's likely to be earned and what's not. Gesicki and Emmanuel Ogbah are pretty much your two biggest free agent targets, obviously. I think Ogbah, for what he's done this year and how consistent he's been in his time with Miami, it's not only the sack numbers, which are okay, they're not fantastic, but it's the quarterback hits, it's the passive defense. He's knocking the ball down at the line of scrimmage 1 or 2 times a game, it feels like. That seems to be the guy that I don't want them to lose out on because there's another team that's a high bidder. Mike Gesicki has been great. He's also had a few games this season when he's kind of put up a blank. It hasn't been as perfect as we all expected, or as earlier in the year it looked like it was going to. But I do want them to re-sign Gesicki. I just think Emmanuel Ogbah's got to be that guy. You got to put your foot down and say you're not losing him. Also, Xavier Howard, who isn't a free agent, but we all know the contract situation that's going on with him. You got to find a way to get that guy in here. You see the instinctive play that he made last week to read Mac Jones's eyes, know exactly where he was going the ball, jump the route, break a very poor tackle attempt, if you want to call it that, from Mac Jones and on his way to the end zone. You got to make sure Ogbah and Howard are back, and it would be a huge bonus if Gesicki was back. He's
Mike Masala, part of the Dolphins Wire. The Dolphins Wire, part of the USA Today umbrella, if you will. Follow Mike on Twitter at Mike_Masala, Mike_Masala, Masala. Mike, thanks for your time and insight. We really appreciate it. You're going to be busy here in the next couple of weeks. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Mike Masala, kind enough to join us here on Miller and Moulton. If I'm a Dolphin fan, I do not want to take any steps back with personnel. All right. Everybody he's mentioned, I'm like, yeah, they all got to come back. I'm tired. We're not taking any more steps back. All right. That's how I would feel as a fan. Figure it out. And I would like to think that offensive coaching has been holding them back. Either Greer missed on all these linemen, or an elite offensive line coach could actually turn a bunch of guys who were pretty highly thought of when they were coming out of the draft and turn them at least into an above average unit.
You and I both looked at Indianapolis for that, David. That offensive line's as good as any in football. They've done it with backups this year. That's where I'd be leaning for an O-line coach. I'd probably, work Pat a little bit harder to see who the other guys are that are out there, but that's where I'd start.
I mean, listen, I throw a ton of money at Bill Callahan in Cleveland. I mean, a ton of money. He's one of probably the 3 best offensive line coaches in the history of the sport. I'm not messing around here. I mean, if you're Stephen Ross, you're getting up there in age. Money's never been a problem. You took $400 million out of your own pocket to help build up the stadium. I mean, go buy the best damn staff you can.
The problem is, David, he's still listening to Greer. And I believe that's a mistake. Because either Greer has been the best drafter with bad coaching, which is on him, Because if you're the GM, you're also responsible for who gets hired as coaches. So I can't figure out how he's still there. And David, if he's still there, how are you going to get these elite coaches? Because I don't think that you are, unless you're just going to move him to the side and keep him around.
Well, most GMs will let the coach put his own staff together. Every now and then you'll have a GM that will really put his fingers down on a staff. But I do think in this area, now that you're going to have a new head coach, everybody's fireable now.
100%. But my point is, how many guys are willing to take this job with Greer still there? Have you limited your choices based on the decision that you made to keep Greer? And I think that you have.
Rhino in our Twitch chat room, I'm devastated. In my lifetime as a Dolphins fan, I almost cried. I never thought I would think about switching teams. I would trade Tua, Greer, and a first-round pick to bring Flores back.
That ship, my friend, has sailed.
But that's some of the pain that Doll fans are feeling. They are honked. I mean, Orlando Alcigari's on board.
He's on an island all by himself.
He called for this. We could play back what he said on this show. It was last week or the week before. He thought Flores needed to go. Flores had too much influence over Greer and some of his free agent moves and what have you. Orlando's all over this. He's also a Chris Greer guy. Always has been.